It's the Joe Show. Hello and welcome to the Joe Show with me, Joe. So, this is the show where I read an article every single day, draw some conclusions, we all learn something. Today's article is entitled, The Connection Between Black English and Memes, How African American Vernacular English Made It to the Internet by Joshua Adams. So I want to point out something real fast, and I know this is going to come as a complete shock and utter surprise to most of you, but I am not a black person. I know, surprising. So this is completely out of my context of life. Really, I've been lucky enough to, since leaving high school, I've been lucky enough to have a lot of black friends since leaving high school. So I have some connection to black culture, and I guess what is called African American Vernacular English. However, it is still rather outside of my particular bubble. So this is the type of thing that I'm super interested in learning about because it's completely foreign to me, very interesting. So let's dive in and find out the connection between black English and memes. So if you are an African American, which I am not, who grew up in an integrated space, you may have had the not so pleasant experience of having others calling African American Vernacular English, or AAVE for short, bad grammar or talking ghetto. Now on that note, I do remember as a kid in high school hearing the phrase talking ghetto before. We used to have a bus that would bring what were called inner city kids into our school, where they were, the rumors were that they were from bad neighborhoods and whatever, but they were all ethnic minorities, Latinos, blacks, and Asians. I always got along with them. I never really understood, and luckily my parents didn't instill any values in me to treat them differently, so I always just viewed them as kids who came to our school, and I was friends with them. But must be said, that's my background. Back to the article. For some, speaking with the habitual be, as in they be, or not conjugating a verb, he crazy, is associated with negative stigmas like being unprofessional or having poor communication skills. But contrary to mainstream understanding, this way of speaking has its own rules and syntax structures and come from a particular experience of black folk in America. Didn't know that. Very cool to know, though. AAVE has a long history, largely rooted in the earliest generations of enslaved Africans that arrived on America's shores. Black English was birthed from people who were forced to learn a second language, English, almost exclusively taught through oral means and without formal instruction, since it was illegal to actually teach a slave how to read. This experience produced a vernacular that reconciled both the differences between English and the different African mother tongues. This dialect has been passed on from generation to generation and is an important part of African American culture. Writer Alice Walker says that when you consider the amount of time black people have been in America, they have spoken black folk English language longer than they've been able to speak standard English language. Many AAVE speakers employ it only in specific contexts. As scholar Andre Brock writes, in Distributed Blackness, African American Subcultures, there are many AAVE speakers who cannot or will not use these forms at work or in certain social settings. Brock was referring to the common experience of linguistic code switching, something I'm actually familiar with, where black people use more standard English when speaking to non-black audience, but revert back to AAVE when they are in a black communal space. In the same way that kids have slang that adults don't understand or lovers laugh at their inside jokes, there are times when we communicate and only mean for a specific person or group, regardless of whether the public sees the message or not, to decipher it. Whether it's saying noob in video game culture or an anime reference, or tweakin' from Chicago AAVE, you have to be within that group to understand the terminology. And even if you aren't black, you can understand this concept through something that we may see just about every time you're online. Memes. Though they once flourished in particular forums like 4chan, Reddit, and Tumblr, and still do flourish on those particular forums, memes have become ubiquitous as part of an average user's social media experience. According to scholar Lemore Schiffman in Memes in Digital Culture, the term meme was first coined by biologist Richard Dawkins to describe how units of culture spread from person to person through imitation. The word meme is a combination of the word mimema, a Greek word meaning something which is imitated, and gene. Memes are the digital manifestation and forms of communication like posters, political art, cartoons, and visual propaganda. Most memes contain some subcultural reference that isn't necessarily meant for everyone. Let's take the example below. It is a tweet from someone. I can't read the name because it's too small. But it says black people will know. And then it shows a black woman pointing her finger and saying something. And then what seems to be above it is text that says, which as a white person, I don't understand. When I first see this meme, I don't get it. It's way beyond my understanding. So the author goes on to say, when you look at this meme, do you get all the references? No, I don't. He explains the meme is of a Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot. That's a tongue twister. Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot. Okay. Lightfoot uses social media and memes to make civic announcements. That's cool. Raises awareness about the pandemic and urges Chicagoans to stay inside. But what does mean? As comedian and writer Trayvon Frey noted, black people know. That must be the tweeter. In that meme, Lightfoot is comedically positioned as a black mother telling her kids to get inside before they get a spanking. Oh, okay. So now if I look at this again and I read it, I'm guessing it says, get your ass in the goddamn house before I beat your motherfucking ass. Guaranteed that's what that's saying. And she's pointing at her kids. Now it all makes sense. I'm sure there's other subcontext that I'm not following here, but now I at least baseline level understand this meme. This meme is showing you one thing but meaning something else, in fact, multiple things. And if you aren't from or knowledgeable about the black community, you likely won't be able to decipher the message. This example shows in some ways how black English is like a meme, particularly when compared to the concept of double talk. History and linguistic scholars trace the origins of double talk back to Africa, but within the context of America, it is deeply rooted in slave experience. Having few constructive outlets to release emotions like anger and sorrow or openly critique their bondage, the enslaved found catharsis through language by using double talk, or saying one thing but meaning another. And it is a way to send messages without the slave owners knowing what they meant. Bad meaning good, or singing hymns about the Israelites escaping from the Pharaoh to symbolize them running away from the plantation. Much of this linguistic tradition was forged in the black church, since many slave owners forbade social gatherings among slaves, with the exception of church and certain holidays. So the church provided a vital space where black people forged communal identity and experienced catharsis from physical and emotional tolls of slavery. It was a place where they could be critical of the master even when he was in the room. By using double talk, black speakers were subverting the rules of English to get their message across. When understanding how memes work as tools to communicate and spread culture through a kind of encryption, we can also more fully understand the ingenuity and creativity embedded in black speech. When we think about what makes for good communication, a simple definition would be, if the person who you want to understand you understands you, you have successfully communicated. Black English follows its own rules, which are meant primarily for those who are fluent in its form. If you hear someone speaking AAVE or see them use it online, there's a good chance that, like memes, even if it is displayed in public, the message might not be meant for you to understand. So that has been the connection between Black English and memes from Joshua Adams. I know I learned something about black culture and about African American Vernacular English, and the origins of double talk, and also how the church community acted as an outlet for their frustration, and now I can understand why it still holds a very important part in black culture in 2020. I think it's a very well-voiced comparison between memes and Black English. So thanks, Joshua Adams, for the great article. And that has been today's Joe Show. If you like my content, please click subscribe below. I'll link also to the original article in the description below. If you have an article or you want me to comment on something, send that to hijoeshow@gmail.com. And until tomorrow, read something interesting. This has been a Joe Show.